and welcome into First Things First. I'm Heidi Watney in for Jenna Wolf. That's Nick Wright. There is Chris Broussard in for Chris Carter. So, Nick, you're really holding down the fort this week.
Yes, right now, Chris has been awesome. Chris was one of my first people I ever worked with on TV, and Chris has been great this week. I miss Chris Carter, and I hope he has had a wonderful wedding and vacation in St. Lucia, but I could not have had a better partner all week, and I appreciate it, and we will finish strong. And you as well, thank you so much for filling in today for Ms. Wolf.
It's been a ball. I like that suit, too.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that, man.
You both looking very dapper on this Friday.
You as well. I don't know if dapper is the word I would use to describe. I don't know. You look wonderful, I would say. So thank you so much, Heidi.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Let's dive right into it, shall we? Despite one of the craziest highlights we have seen from LeBron James, the Cavs lost to the 76ers 108-97 last night. LeBron had 30 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists in the loss. Cleveland has now lost 3 of 5 since the All-Star break, and LeBron spoke about it after the game.
I think right now there's so much that we're trying to fast track that it could become too much, I believe, sometimes, you know, and it's just tough. It's tough on our new guys. I mean, it's 7 games, and we're trying to, put a lot in and get a lot in for these guys, but, maybe, maybe scale it a little bit back.
So, Chris, how worried are you about the Cavs' struggles?
I'm not worried. I mean, they can win the Eastern Conference. I felt that even before the trades. I feel that way now. Doesn't look like they can beat Golden State or Houston or whoever comes out of the West, but they certainly can win the East. It's interesting because I feel like they're searching. Look, what they're going through are just the normal growing pains of a new team that's been put together, okay? But I've said searching because last night, LeBron says, we got too much going on. We need to dial back, simplify. A few days earlier, Ty Lue, the head coach, had said, well, we become too predictable offensively. We're not putting enough stuff in for the new guys. We've been too careful with them. So they're just searching. They don't know. They don't have an explanation. I feel like I have an explanation. When I look at this team offensively, I've said it before, I think they're too three-point shot centric, and I don't want them to stop shooting threes, and I don't want them to stop shooting a lot of threes because they are a good three-point shooting team. However, when I look at their half-court offense, which is a mess, and it's been a mess really since the trade, if not before, what I see is a team where you essentially have 5 guys on the perimeter around the three-point line, other than Tristan, who's not an offensive threat, so he may be in the lane, and you have one guy driving. It might be LeBron, it might be Jordan Clarkson, it might be Rodney Hood. And that guy that drives is either going all the way to the cup and finishing. LeBron's doing that a lot. Or if he draws a double team or doesn't want to finish, he'll kick it out to a three-point shooter. I think they need to have more cutting with the driver.
Cutting from the drive. Exactly.
Yeah, they did it a few times last night. LeBron got a few passes from a driver. Larry Nance Jr. got a few passes and finished with layups or dunks. They can do that more often, and I think that would be a big help in their offense because I think it's kind of predictable. It's either one guy at the top of the key or at the wing who's sizing you up and going to go by you and then kick it out or finish, and that's it. So bring some cutting. Most of their movement is just for pick and roll. Other teams, you see a lot of cutting. You see a lot more movement on the baseline. With the Cavs, you see going to set a pick, and then everybody else is kind of standing around.
You heard what LeBron said. Ty Lue, after the game, said they thought they were thinking too much on offense. So the question is, how worried am I? Big picture, I'm not concerned. However, what is odd about this this stretch right now is the Cavs over the last 3.5 years have had a lot of ups and downs. That's almost always been based on their defense. The offense has been elite, top 5 in the league, basically from the first moment LeBron came back. When they've ebbed and flowed, it's been because sometimes they've had a good defense, mediocre defense, awful defense to go along with what has been a very good offense. What I saw last night was a team that looked stagnant on offense and a team that, if not for the transition game, which has improved since they added these younger, more athletic players, they would really struggle to score. You mentioned the three-point shot. Since the Cavs, with the new players, they've lost 3 times. in those 3 losses, 8 of 35, 8 of 34, 9 of 32 last night from 3. That's 25 of 101. So that's pretty easy math. It's just under 25% from 3 on a lot of three-point shots per game. So to me, there were some positive signs in that game in the second and third quarters last night where I thought the defense was playing excellent basketball, were it looked like if Joel Embiid was not.
Very well.
I thought the defense was bad in the first quarter. I thought they were going to have to score 120 to win it. And then the second and third quarters, I think they held Philly to a combined 45 points. I thought actually 42 points. I thought the defense played well in the middle of the game and really early in the fourth quarter until the very end of it.
They held them to 44% shooting, and quickly, I think one encouraging thing was I saw Larry Nance Jr. doing a decent job guarding Joel Embiid. So you can look at a small lineup where he can play center, LeBron can play the 4, and that's going to be a pretty good lineup.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, speaking of defense, 76ers have the 4th best defense in the league. So do we give any credit to them?
No.
You say no just flatly?
I mean, they're a good defensive team, don't get me wrong. But no, the Cavs should be able to maneuver against that defense.
Philly has length and youth, and so they are full of effort. They're not taking possessions off. So it's one of the reasons that they're a tough team to score on. Like you mentioned, they're a top 5 defense for opponent field goal percentage, for points per 100 possessions. But the other thing that's reminded me of was the first dozen games of the season. Remember, LeBron had missed training camp. You have all these new players. They started off 5-7. The Cavs are going to be in a really odd spot, unlike any team that I can remember, any good team in the modern NBA, where 4 separate times in one season, they're going to have to essentially remake what they're trying to do. Once to start the season with the new players who didn't get a training camp with LeBron. Once right after Christmas when Isaiah Thomas came back. Once right after the trade deadline right now. And then once again in a few weeks when Kevin Love, who they will have plays run for Kevin Love. They will run an enormous amount of their offense when LeBron's on their bench through Kevin Love. Rodney Hood, Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance, George Hill have never played one single minute in their careers as a teammate of Kevin Love. So they're going to have to go through this whole thing again. LeBron and his excellence in the month of February, and he was very good again last night, has sustained them to a degree to where it's not like you have to worry about them falling out of the playoffs. You don't have to significantly worry about them falling out of the top 4 seeds. But this is going to continue to be a growing process. You know what it kind of reminded me of, Chris? The first 2 games Isaiah Thomas came in.
Yeah.
He was good. Yeah. And everyone's like, oh, look at what they added. The first 2 games after the trade, the Cavs were awesome. And everyone's like, oh, and then all of a sudden for IT, I don't know what happened, but the health seemed to quickly deteriorate, or his confidence did. And for these guys, it seemed like maybe the initial, I don't know if it's momentum or energy they had from the trade wore off. And what it became was, we don't really know each other. We don't really know what to do on offense.
Which is natural, yeah. I mean, I would rather have them struggle offensively than defensively. Because as you mentioned, they're going to put it together offensively. I mean, you got the best player in the world in LeBron. You know what he brings you. Kevin Love is going to be a huge help. We've talked this week about how when he is the definitive second option, he's been great. 20 points, 10 rebounds, 50% shooting, 40% from 3. And that's critical because Kevin Love has never been an efficient scorer. Even when he was putting up these monster numbers in Minnesota, he wasn't that efficient.
It was a volume score.
Now in Cleveland, playing off LeBron and not having someone in between you, Kyrie or Isaiah Thomas, he was really good. So he's critical for them because right now they don't have that second scorer. It could be Rodney Hood one night. It could be Jordan Clarkson. It could be George Hill. But all 3 of those guys, and then anyone else, J.R. Smith, whoever you want to throw in, they're inconsistent. Now, none of them are as inconsistent as J.R. He's the most inconsistent. But Rodney Hood is up and down. Utah has.
And we didn't even mention this, and this is not why they lost last night. But J.R. Smith didn't start last night, didn't play last night, and it was because of something. Now, I tried to find out. Chris has better sources than me league-wide. I got some decent sources on this one particular team. I tried to find out what exactly happened with J.R. Something happened. They said it was within the team, meaning it wasn't an arrest, it wasn't something outside of the realm of basketball. Something happened after the shoot-around yesterday that they suspended him for a game. That put Rodney Hood in the starting lineup, which, by the way, Rodney Hood maybe should be in the starting lineup when JR is not suspended. Yep. But the other note with Kevin Love, it's not just his addition. The guy who is starting in Kevin Love's place, Cedi Osman, might go from starting to, in the playoffs, out of the rotation entirely. I think people are wondering, why wouldn't you start Jeff Green there? Why are you starting Cedi Osman when he's clearly not, it's not the next man up? I think what Ty Lue is doing there is he wants, when Kevin Love comes back, as few people as possible to be disrupted. So if Jeff Green were starting and then he's going to go back to the bench unit's disrupted. He's disrupted. If Cedi goes from the starter to the 11th man, then it's the least disruption on the team. But in the meantime, you have a guy who is not yet ready to be an NBA starter, a 22-year-old rookie he's playing 15, 18 minutes a game, and he's not really a productive NBA player at this point in his career.
Yeah, and I think, too, right now, LeBron kind of has to adopt that mentality of just carrying the team through scoring. And he doesn't want to do that. He's going to get his 25 to 30 just because he's that great, but he doesn't want to be that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant that goes out and gets you 40 a night until Kevin Love gets back. When he was in Cleveland, his first stint for those 7 years, he led the league in scoring 1 year. But that's not how he thinks of himself. But right now, when you don't have that second scorer who you know every night he's going to give me at least 18 points, then LeBron may have to just go ahead and think of himself as a scorer first until Kevin Love gets back.
This is the sixth time this year the Cavs have not had a single player other than LeBron score even 15 points. They're 1-5 in those games.
Finally, big nights for two former Cavs. Dwayne Wade had 25 points off the bench for Miami. Isaiah Thomas scored 29 for the Lakers. All of this on a night when Cleveland lost for the third time in 5 games. Chris, is there any reason to think the Cavs would have been better off sticking with Wade and Isaiah?
Uh-oh.
Let me hear this.
Buyer's remorse, seller's remorse.
No. They did the right thing. They did the right thing. I mean, look, Isaiah is in a different role in L.A. There is no one dominant player like LeBron James in L.A. So Isaiah can be that guy on different nights, maybe even for the rest of the season. We'll see what happens. He's also coming off the bench, which he wasn't in that situation in Cleveland, and I don't think would have handled that situation very well. He got humbled by the trade, to some degree at least. He recognized his value is not where he thought it was. So he has no choice but to be the good soldier coming off the bench in L.A. until they put him in the starting lineup, if ever. So, no, they did the right thing with him. Dwayne Wade, there are people that have said to me they will miss him in the playoffs because he can get hot, have a 20-something point game once a series or something like that. But still, even with him, with Jordan Clarkson now, or even as before with Isaiah Thomas, Derrick Rose, you didn't really need Wade. It was too much duplication, too many guys to do the same thing. So they did the right thing, no question.
IT could average 30 the rest of the year, and the Cavs trading him was the right move.
Agreed.
He was a toxic force in that locker room. That was not entirely on him, by the way. But he was. It was what it was. He and Jay Crowder both still wanted to be in Boston. Both didn't seem to love playing with LeBron. Both certainly didn't love their roles on that team. They had to move those two guys. Additionally, it's been reported, and I think credibly, that D. Wade got a little sideways with some of the guys in that locker room that had won championships, not intentionally, not D. Wade trying to be a jerk, but D. Wade carries himself like who he is, like one of the 25 greatest players ever, like a champion, like a guy who is...
Might be a little high, but...
Okay, regardless, a first ballot, no doubt Hall of Famer who at one point in his career was one of the 3 best players in the sport. That's what he carries himself like. And like he's LeBron's best friend, because he is. And he walked into that locker room when some of the guys felt like, wait, you just got here, man. You just got here, and you're not that anymore. It was reported also that it wasn't just Isaiah Thomas that confronted Kevin Love about where did you go, bro, the day that he left the team with illness. But D. Wade was a part of that as well. That D. Wade was the first one, and Isaiah piled on. So D. Wade needed to be moved for a lot of reasons. And with the trades, he wasn't going to get minutes anymore. Yeah. Like, because if you remember, they didn't get anything back for D-Wade. They got a conditional second-round pick that won't convey. They did that out of a courtesy to him. They said, hey, you can stay here, but your minutes are going to go away, or we can work out a trade with you to Miami. And what that did for D-Wade, and for what it's worth, Gabrielle Union, it was a little rejuvenation. For them as a family, for him as a player, I get to finish my career where I always should have finished my career. I have no reason to believe D-Wade would have played the way he's played the last 2 games if he were still in Cleveland. So for those reasons, I don't think they have any regret about moving those guys. They needed to be moved. What did Kobe Altman say? We were on a slow march towards death until they made these trades. They had to make these trades. But I wish both these guys the best. I hope D-Wade has some awesome playoff moments, and I hope IT gets a bucket of money. These guys, D-Wade, for very different reasons, they have amazing stories and have, in different ways, been amazing players. But they weren't useful for the Cavs anymore.
No.
Yeah, win for everyone. Moving on, Lonzo Ball scored just 8 points last night. He also had 7 assists, 6 rebounds, and 6 steals. But more importantly, his Lakers won 131-113. And while Lonzo didn't reach double digits in any category, his coach was impressed. Take a listen.
To me, he was probably the best player on the court tonight, and I think he only shot 5 times, which is why we've been so high on him from day one. He's one of the very unique players. It doesn't matter if he's taking shots and scoring 20 or not. He can impact the game all over, and he was doing that for us tonight, and just all around, probably, in my opinion, the best player on the floor tonight.
Chris, is it starting to look like Lonzo is becoming that star we expected?
Look, I've said it before. I think Lonzo has been treated very unfairly. People have said he's a bust. I'm like, they were saying he was a bust in like his 2nd month in the NBA.
Yep.
I mean, what are you thinking? Exactly. And it's been because, and I don't want to put all the blame on his dad. I'm not saying this as a negative. It is what it is. His dad's bluster, his dad's braggadocio, his dad's antics put a target on Lonzo's back, not just from players, not just Patrick Beverley and guys that went at Lonzo, but from the media and fans, meaning people expected way too much of him. They expected, LeVar said, he's going to be an all-star in his first year. He's going to lead the Lakers to the playoffs his first year. Magic Johnson joined in. Save some of my records, Lonzo. And let me say this, as great, no matter how great Lonzo becomes, he will never be Magic Johnson. He's not a Magic Johnson player. I think at best, he's a Jason Kidd, which is great. That's a Hall of Famer. That's a guy that got to 2 finals, 3 finals, won a championship. So that would be great if he's Jason Kidd. But he's not going to be Magic. But because of those expectations, people looked at his struggles in the first 2 months and said, he's a bust, and like he was a 3-year veteran or something.
And people were rooting against him, period, point blank, because of the dad. The people, there are not everyone, but there were some people that had such distaste for LeVar that they wanted. LeVar was out in Lithuania doing his Facebook show, the guy they could take it out on, the guy we could discuss every day was Lonzo. And Lonzo did struggle early. Early on, he was the least efficient offensive scorer in the league. In the paint, outside the paint, from three-point line, there was a period in time where it looked like Lonzo just had lost his ability, not to the Markelle Fultz level, but lost his ability to shoot the basketball. But I want to show the audience, look at his first 24 games to the last 15. Look at the shooting percentages. 44% from the field for a rookie is fine.
Yep.
42% from 3 for anyone is outstanding. Now, I don't think he's really a 42% three-point shooter, but that's over the last 15 games. Yep. Compare that to what he was the first 24, where he was less than 32% from the field, less than 25% from 3. So he has markedly improved. But here's the other thing, Chris. Even with the whole season, even with the first 24 games, he's giving you 10, 7, and 7 a night.
Yep.
In NBA history, here's the list of rookies to do that. Oscar, Magic, Ben Simmons, and Lonzo. So prior to this year, only Oscar and Magic had ever, as rookies, given you 10, 7, and 7. Penny didn't do it. Kidd didn't do it. LeBron didn't do it. So he is helping you other places. And you mentioned it when we played one of the highlights, where he has surprised me and where he didn't get any credit even early in the year, or especially early in the year, is as a defender. I thought he would be an enormous defensive liability because despite his length, he doesn't strike me as overly athletic, overly quick. I thought he would get put in the torture chamber by some of the great point guards in the West. He has been, you said a coach said he might be their best defender?
Yep. And he's not going to be a lockdown defender. There are guys that have gone off on him this year, but he has the instincts. He's long. He can get in passing lanes. He can get deflections. We see on this highlight, he can get steals. When he double teams you, that's a 6'7" point guard who's long double teaming you. So he has been a good defender. Here's the thing. You mentioned his stats, which that does tell a story. That says something. But this is the type of guy, you're not going to judge him just by his stats. You may not even judge him mainly by his stats. It is what he does on the floor. It is the culture change that he brings. It's the unselfishness that he brings where not only is he making the extra pass, but other guys are making the extra pass. That is what Lonzo Ball brings. Now, he's got a couple things he's got to work on. He's got to continue to be aggressive all the time. Not just, there were times earlier in the year where he just didn't, he looked like he was lollygagging, like he wasn't even into the game. Stay aggressive. Jason Kidd couldn't shoot, but was always aggressive. Shot well late in his career, but earlier couldn't shoot, was always aggressive. He has to do that. Ben Simmons is getting in the lane constantly. The second thing, the three-point shot is fine. The mid-range jumper he's got to develop. And I know people, the mid-range isn't a big part of the game anymore. You need a threat of a mid-range because one reason when he either has to go all the way to the hole or he's got to shoot a three. You need that in between. So when he drives off the three-point line, people don't know, is he going to pull up or is he going to keep going all the way? That will help him become a better finisher because people won't know what he's going to do.
And we also, this is the first impression bias. After the first month of the year, here's what everyone knew. Jason Tatum, future star. I heard Celtics fans telling me, you know, even if the Pelicans want to trade Anthony Davis, I'd do it, but I don't want to include Tatum. Like, people were, Jason Tatum should have been the #1 pick of the draft after a month. Also after a month, Lonzo. I mean, is he even going to make his second contract?
Unbelievable.
By the end of this year, if we do a blind stat test, which I'm known to do, of Tatum's year-end stats versus Lonzo's year-end stats, it's going to be a coin flip on who you'd rather have. Because Tatum hit a bit of a rookie wall while Lonzo started to excel somewhat. And by the way...
And Lonzo's been out, though, too.
Lonzo has been out, but Tatum's also doing it where there's not as much pressure on him, where while they're playing in bigger games, he has obviously a better coach, no disrespect to Luke Walton, and obviously a far better star player on his team in Kyrie Irving. Like, we all got to take a deep breath on this. It is rare a guy does what Donovan Mitchell did, where it comes into the league and basically from start to the finish of his rookie year is awesome. I don't know if Ben Simmons would have done what Ben Simmons is doing as what I would call a true rookie. Because Ben Simmons got to spend a year traveling with a team, learning about the NBA life without having to play. So we all, you know, the question is, will he be a future star? I guess it defines star. I think he'll make some all-star teams. I think he'll be considered one of the top point guards in the league at one point in time. Like, will he ever be the best player in the league? Almost assuredly not, but that's a very short list of guys that have been.
The challenge just for him to make an all-star team will be tough. In the West, it is stacked with players, but especially guards. Yeah. And so now, if his thing is going to be winning. That's how you're going to judge him. If they're winning big time and he's averaging 15 points, 10 assists,
7 rebounds,
7 or 8 rebounds, he'll make all-star teams if they're winning. If they're not, he's not going to make them in the West.
All right, on to the NFL. After going 0-16, the Browns have the honor of the first pick in the draft. Many have projected them to take one of the 2 quarterbacks out of California, Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen. However, many consider Saquon Barkley to be the best overall player in the draft. Cleveland's GM suggested he could do something completely different.
There's a lot of things I can do at #1 and not just get a quarterback as well. You know, my door is wide open. If, you know, somebody wants to come up and, you know, talk to me about a trade, I'm willing to trade. But also, I'm going to do what's best for this organization, and I will do that. Well, you know, any good GM wants to, you know, see what, you know, field phone calls from all his from his peers. So why wouldn't I? So that's why I say, you know, guys, just give me a call and see what's up.
So Dorsey is open for business. Nick, how valuable is that top pick in this year's draft?
Well, how valuable is a franchise quarterback?
Yep.
That's how valuable it is. And how valuable is a franchise quarterback? The single most valuable asset in all of sports, short of an NBA superstar. Like, as far as one guy being able to change your franchise. Now, I am not going to sit here and claim I know which of these quarterbacks is the franchise quarterback. I have an inkling there are a couple of them, but I'm not certain. But that also really isn't my job. That's John Dorsey's job and other GM's jobs to figure out which one is the guy. But just look at the last decade in the NFL. 2008, Matt Ryan. 2009, Matt Stafford. You can go through every draft over the last decade. There's only been one that, now that we look back on it, there's not a franchise quarterback. 2013. And going into that draft, everyone was like, there's no quarterbacks in this draft. E.J. Manuel ended up getting overdrafted. Geno Smith got a little overdrafted. But those are – but going into the draft, people said there's probably no first-round pick quarterback in this draft. In this year's draft, people are like, there might be 4. There might be 5. Now, some of those guys will be busts. But if you know there's a franchise quarterback, that's how valuable it is, which is why Cleveland – if they are able to sign a veteran quarterback, could get a king's ransom for that number 1 pick in this draft if they don't want to draft a quarterback there.
Do you sign, if you're Cleveland, and there's obviously talk about them going to get Kirk Cousins, do you do that? He's a very good quarterback. He's not top 5, never will be, I don't believe, top 5.
Agree.
Okay, so you have a chance in this draft to get maybe a superstar. We don't know which one it'll be, if any, but as far as quarterback drafts go, this is about as good as it gets. You never know if you're going to have a superstar quarterback, but this is about as good and as deep as it gets. And to illustrate your point, I think there are 3 teams, correct me if I'm wrong, that are essentially in the Super Bowl hunt every year. New England, franchise quarterback. Green Bay, franchise quarterback. Pittsburgh, franchise quarterback. If you want to add New Orleans, maybe. I mean, I know
they're not in it every year, but I would add Seattle. I would add Seattle, franchise quarterback
franchise
to me.
Quarterback. Yeah, I mean, there's a few others, like Kansas City since Andy Reid's been there, but Alex Smith was very good.
But the 3 you mentioned are the 3 premier
every
teams.
Year.
Absolutely right.
And so that is how important it is. That's why if I'm the Jets, if I'm Jacksonville, even, I know they just signed Bortles, Denver, I'm looking at trying to get that pick. If I definitely have one guy above the rest of them, I'm looking to maybe get that pick if I'm one of those guys. And that's why if you're Cleveland, look, John Dorsey is right. Of course you do your due diligence. If you want to call and offer me a king's ransom, sure, I'll listen no matter what the pick is. But outside of something like that, they got to go with a quarterback because they actually, as you know, they got some talent elsewhere.
The only way, listen, I'm an advocate of Cleveland. I think they have 2 paths. My guess is they will do neither. I think path 1 is, while I think for most teams, Kirk Cousins will end up killing your cap long term. Cleveland has so much cap space. If they massively front-loaded his deal, so if everyone's going to offer him 5 years, 150, most teams where the cap hit goes 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, Cleveland could do it where it's 55. Down to 25, down to 20, down to 15 to 10. Like, you could do it to where he doesn't kill your cap. That would be option A for me if I'm Cleveland. Option B would be I would draft a quarterback at 1 and a quarterback at 4. I'm making sure, and let them go compete. And with hopefully you're right on both, and you can trade one of them for a future first-rounder next season, but give yourself the best chance to get your franchise guy. Because I hear what Dorsey's saying, I'm open for business, but the reality is this. If they don't sign a veteran, they cannot trade that pick. And here's why. They had the pick that became Carson Wentz, and they traded it away. They had the number 1 pick last year, drafted Myles Garrett. Fine, I get it. They then, though, also had the pick that became Deshaun Watson and traded it away. You had the picks that became the best quarterback from the last 2 drafts and traded them away. You can't then this year, not unless you have signed Kirk Cousins, trade away the number 1 pick and then potentially not get your guy. I just don't think you can do that in Cleveland.
Why do you like going to Cousins in free agency over drafting, say, Darnold or Rosen or whoever?
I think that if they again, very specifically, go to Cousins the way set it up the way I'm saying, where it's front-loaded. Cleveland has so many holes, and because that number 1 pick is such an asset, I think they could set themselves up to have multiple first-round picks for years to come. Like if you trade the number 1 to the Jets, right, for the 6 and their number 1 next year. Yeah. You can then next year go into the draft with 2 picks. You can continue to flip it forward to try to build up blue chip prospects. That's why I would do it if I were to sign the franchise guy.
I like your idea. Draft 2 quarterbacks, let them fight it out.
Man, everyone thinks it's nuts.
I don't know.
It's never been done.
I can't go with that.
It's never been done. I like it.
It's interesting. You're right. Look, it increases your chances of one of them being great. Do I want both of them? You say competition is great. Of course it is. But do I want both of them going in like that?
And Chris
the
Carter
cream
thinks
will
it's
rise to the top. The cream will rise to the top. All right. We're now joined by former NFL head coach Eric Mangini.
What up, Coach? Good to see you, brother.
Thanks for joining us again.
I guess I got to give the handshake.
Good to have you.
It's good to be here.
Mike Zimmer apparently wants to get himself fired. The Vikings face a tough decision at quarterback. They could go with Case Keenum, who led them to the NFC title game. They could go with Teddy Bridgewater, who they drafted in the first round in 2014. They could stick with Sam Bradford, who was their Week 1 starter last season, or they could try to sign Kirk Cousins. Head coach Mike Zimmer says he knows how much is at stake.
I feel very confident, really, in all 3 guys. I love all 3 of them. They're great. They're great people. I love how they work. They understand how we do things there as a team and the way we go about our business. And you know, it's important for myself and Rick and the organization. We picked the right guy that is going to help us to continue to move forward. If we don't do that, then I'll probably get fired.
I know it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but, Coach, how important is it to get the quarterback decision right for a coach?
No, he's absolutely right. If they don't get it, if they don't get the quarterback decision right, he probably will get fired, and that's the reality.
Eventually, right?
But that's the reality with every organization is that question, until it's handled, you're always playing catch-up, and you've got to play really well in other areas, which Minnesota has done an excellent job of. The difficult thing about this decision is they know all 3 guys. They've seen all 3 guys play. They have the most information of anybody in terms of the knee injury, the injuries in general, the way that they are in the locker room, the meeting rooms, and the fact that he loves all of them but doesn't love any one of them enough to say, okay, this is our guy. I think that's a problem. And when you look at Kirk Cousins, you could say, okay, we're going to go get that guy, but you better have a conviction there, too, because the amount of money you're going to have to spend for him changes the dynamic of the team well into the future.
Before we get to the Cousins part of it, I just want to stay on from the coach perspective, because I've gotten over the last year, I feel like I've gotten to know you pretty well, on camera, off camera, talking football with you and talking about your basically career in the league. And I know how much attention to detail. I know how much time you spent. We talked off the air yesterday about how the analytics stuff that I love, how you tried to be ahead of the curve on that and work on things. And what happened to you, certainly on your second stop, and you could argue the first stop with the Jets, is exactly what he's talking about. You didn't have a quarterback in Cleveland. Didn't matter the other things you were doing, and they thought they should be better than they were, and it did cost you your job. How helpless of a feeling is it that it feels like I can do all these things right and it won't matter? And I'm sure, and I'm not asking you to name names, but there are some guys you look across the league, you're like, man, they're not doing half the things we do right, but they've got this future Hall of Famer, this star quarterback, and it doesn't matter. Like, as a coach, is it almost a helpless feeling at times if you don't have the guy?
Well, you're constantly trying to solve that problem because you know that the clock is started, and if you don't get that figured out sooner rather than later, the other parts of it at some point are going to break down, or you're going to have some setbacks. And if the quarterback's not in place, you're going to be in a really difficult spot as a team, as an organization, and there's very little patience. You look at Bill Belichick, and he's 1-5, one winning season out of his first 6 years as a head coach. And insert Tom Brady, and things change dramatically. To me, that's the best example. Now, it had to work for both of them, but that's a great example of what that position does.
Zimmer made a few comments yesterday that I thought were telling. He said the reason we've won 39 games over the last 4 years is not because we had this one guy or that one guy. He also said we don't want to get crazy here. I was taking those as thing. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But to me, that said, do we want to go pay a Kirk Cousins $30 million when we know in 2019 what that could do to their team in free agency? Their defense, which was best in the league, I don't want to say be decimated, but could certainly lose out big time in free agency if they sign Cousins. Yep. So what I think they should do, Brad, as much as I love Cousins there, I don't think Bradford's the guy. He's just too hurt. I mean, you can't count
rely on him.
Too fragile. I don't think Keenum's the guy because you said it yesterday. I think his first 5 years, you can't just dismiss that and say, oh, he's the guy he was last year, especially when he wasn't that great in the playoffs this year. I think Bridgewater's the guy. I don't know if Bridgewater will ever be quite as good as Cousins. I think he can be close. We know how much of a leader he was for them, how much they loved him, the teammates, the organization. He certainly can be as good as Keenum was last year, I think, consistently, and it won't decimate your team in free agency in the future. So that's what I like for them.
Coach, your take on those four guys?
Well,
Who would you want?
It's difficult. When you look at this situation, I don't know if there's any strong conviction across the board. They've each had success in that system. There's a new offensive coordinator coming into play, and the other reality is none of these guys may be available to them. They all have options too.
And they didn't franchise any of them.
They didn't franchise any of them. So when they may go out to the market, and as much as Minnesota is lukewarm on the guys or don't have a conviction, there may be someone else who does, which could change this dynamic dramatically. I do feel that they need to take a step back and they need to make sure that whoever they commit to is the right guy, like Zimmer's saying, because you put too much money in, you can't get out of it.
The money thing, and this is a point of contention with me and CeCe, the money thing absolutely matters, and it matters enormously in a sport with a hard cap. So, like, there's baseball where there's no cap whatsoever. Spend whatever the owner wants to spend. There's the NBA where there's a cap, but it's a soft cap. You can go over. There's a luxury tax thing. Then there's the NFL, which is whatever that salary cap number is, you can do some machinations with signing bonuses, all those things. But if the number's $180 million, you cannot go into the season with $185 million against your cap and be like, we'll make it up to you next year. There is a set amount of money you can spend, and if you do we'll pay it forward next year, eventually you got to deal with it. And so what I've seen in recent NFL history, if we just take the last 4 teams this year or over the last 10 years, is there's 2 paths, in my eyes, to being great. One is Brady, Rodgers, Roethlisberger, have a future Hall of Famer at quarterback, everything else falls into place. The other way is how the Jags did it, how the Vikings did it, how the Eagles did it. And I know Wentz was playing great this year, but is either you have a cheap quarterback with a great 52 guys around him. Like Wentz was awesome as well. But when the Seahawks went to the Super Bowls, Russell Wilson was great, but he was cheap. He was on his rookie deal. We have seen guys, they are either on their rookie deal or it's like Blake Bortles last year. Well, he was on his rookie deal. The Vikings last year, they have guys cheaply so they can spend on the 52. I say that to say this. I haven't seen the Kirk Cousins method work. You get a guy who is somewhere 10 to 15 in the league. You pay him like he's a top 5 guy. That's what happened to the Ravens after the Super Bowl with Flacco. And where have they been? It's what I feel is happening to the Lions. Like, Stafford's good, but he's not as good as he's paid. To me, the worst place you can be is have a good quarterback who is paid like a superstar quarterback because of what it does to the rest of your team. And that's what you're talking about with the free agency.
But the problem with the market is you've got to pay those guys like they're elite guys if you want to keep them or if you want to go get them. It's about timing. It's about what the market will bear. And a lot of times in free agency, guys get paid way more than they should ever make. And then there's this expectation that they're going to play like a Pro Bowler or a Hall of Famer just because you paid him a lot of money. Just because you pay a guy a lot of money doesn't mean he got any better. It just means that's what the market said. That's what the market said you should pay him.
But when you see the Vikings, they had success with Teddy Bridgewater 2 years ago. They got to the playoffs, Blair Walsh field goal away from winning a playoff game. They started off well 2 years ago with Sam Bradford until they started out 5-0 and injuries decimated them. Last year, they do what they do with Case Keenum. Does that tell you that this is a team that doesn't need the force multiplier at quarterback because of the other 52 guys?
Well, this tells me that Mike Zimmer has done an incredible job of managing that team, of building that roster. But they have been pretty aggressive in trying to solve the quarterback problem. They traded #1 draft picks for Sam Bradford. Teddy Bridgewater, well, he was...
They traded up to get him into the first round.
They traded up to get him, and then who did they have before that? There's been 3 different quarterbacks here that they've tried to solve
Christian Ponder
with first-round draft picks.
Yep.
So it's obviously a very important thing that they're trying to address. They just haven't been able to get it quite right.
And And we are now talking about LeBron James.
I don't think he meant to do it, but that's the most incredible thing.
That's unbelievable. He should have claimed
no
it.
way
That's my point. Is he should have claimed
LeBron
it.
was named Player of the Month in February, and that was before he did that. That was a month where he averaged a triple-double. Earlier this week, he became the lone member of the 30,000 points, 8,000 rebounds, and 8,000 assist club. The lone member, mind you. Doug, how far has LeBron climbed in your all-time rankings?
I mean, he's great. He's so incredible in what the plethora of things that he does. I mean, I know where we're going with this.
Is he in your top 10?
Yeah, he's in my top 10.
Is he ahead of Larry Bird?
You got a strange top 10.
Hold on, is he ahead of Larry Bird?
No.
No.
But go ahead and look, I don't agree. I think he's second greatest of all time next to Jordan. But I did tell Nick, I can understand how some people, Larry Bird was better than most people think. And so make your argument for Bird, because I know Nick will.
Larry Bird, by the way, I don't think he was trash. I think he's the 9th greatest player ever. So, but go ahead.
So we're arguing. You know, it's like
of course we are nitpicking.
We're nitpicking.
My point has always been this about LeBron. He's great. Okay, he's incredible in a Magic Johnson sort of way in that he generally makes others better, and he loads up the stat sheet like we've never seen before. Mm-hmm. And part of the loading up the stat sheet is basketball's played differently than it's ever been played before. There's a ball dominance for the best player in terms of the percentage of times which you have your ball in your hands to make plays. You're talking about more possessions, more three-point shots, more points,
sure,
and you're going to have greater stats. So it's stats a little bit on steroids. But a blind man can see he's an incredible dominant player, and he's either been the best or the second best player in the league for the last decade. That said, when it comes down to the end of a game in a championship series, I would rather have Larry Bird have the basketball. I would rather have Magic Johnson have the basketball. I would rather have Michael Jordan have the basketball.
Based on what?
Based upon what I've watched in NBA Finals and Eastern Conference Finals. You know, he has had some moments like when he carried the Cavs early in his career, was it 25, 26 straight points against the Detroit Pistons 48. That were incredible. One thing that sometimes is missed is when Ray Allen hit the shot in the corner, he did hit shots in order to bring them back. Game 7 of the same series with the Spurs, he was the only one with any gas in the tank, and he carried his team. But by and large, and maybe this is me looking back with tinted lenses, Michael Jordan was always not only the best player, but the go-to player who was willing to take and make the big shot and the big play. And occasionally, when double-teamed, he would make the big pass.
What about Bird? I want to hear the Bird. Because if Bird's better than him.
Did you live through the Bird?
Hey, Doug, I'm going to tell you something real quick. Hold on. I didn't live through World War II, but I could write a 30-page essay on it. So you didn't have to live through it, all right? Like, I mean, if you had to live through something, Bird, nobody could ever write an obituary.
Let me say this about Bird.
That's a terrible argument.
You can bring up, like, the points you're talking about is Boston, his last year in Cleveland in his first stint. That series, he faded when they lost in 6 in the second round. Dallas, obviously, he faded in his first championship run or finals.
And since then, he has the greatest 7-year run in the history of the league.
Larry Bird, in his first finals championship, they won. He had 2 8-point games in that series. Yeah. If LeBron did something like that, he would be demolished for it. And Cedric Maxwell was the MVP of that final series. Sure. People would have taken that, like, some people would have acted like LeBron didn't even win that title if one of his role-playing teammates was the MVP.
And go ahead.
No, just the idea that I just would rather these guys. I have no numbers to back it up because LeBron, of course, has better career field goal percentage on game-winning shots in the regular season and the playoffs than Kobe or Jordan. Oh, but in the biggest moments, I just feel it. Even though, of course, LeBron averages the most points in Game 7s in NBA history and the most points when facing elimination in NBA history. Oh, but it was just this. There was something. There's nothing.
No, it's pretty simple. I mean, last night's is an example, right, where LeBron can be great, but he needs that other guy to carry him. He needs the Kyrie Irving to make the shots down the stretch against the Warriors in Game 7.
The Warriors in Game 7, you mean the final 3 games that they won, where he averaged 36, 12, and 9 in those last 3 games against the greatest team ever?
He was amazing. But I'm not diminishing the amount of amazing he was. Remember, when Larry Bird, there was fewer teams in the league. The teams were a little bit more loaded. So when he was playing against the Lakers in the NBA Finals, the Lakers had a plethora of Hall of Famers, much like the Warriors.
What did the Celtics have?
But so too did the Celtics, right? So it's a completely different scale where they had more weapons
So what
then.
was Bird better at?
Bird's a better shooter. It's not close. I think Bird is as good or better as a passer. Bird's a better rebounder. Now, the difference is you're going to look at the rebound numbers and you're going to quote me some stats. But the fact is that Larry Bird didn't stay healthy. And the fact is that basketball is played so differently now. Whereas if it was played back then, if he played back then, he'd be a power. There's no power forwards in the game. There's no specific rebounders. I'm
not going to quote you some stat on rebounding. I'll concede the rebounding point. LeBron James obviously has a higher field goal percentage. In the playoffs, even has a higher three-point percenage. Now, you can say it doesn't matter, but those are just the numbers.
Don't say he's a better shooter.
No, he's not a better shooter. He's not a better shooter. He is a better scorer. Larry Bird averaged 22 points a game for his career. LeBron averages 27. He is a better scorer. Bird's one of the greatest shooters ever. The idea that anyone who's ever played the game is a better passer than LeBron outside of Magic Johnson, I reject on its face.
Okay, let's say Mark Jackson's a better passer. John Stockton, Steve Nash, they're all better passers. They're not better passers. There's maybe not a better 6'8" passer, but there's plenty of better passers.
A lot of point guards.
Rajon Rondo's a better passer. But you're talking about as a power forward as a passer. Larry Bird was a better passer, in my mind, a much more fluid, much more natural passer than LeBron James, a creative passer. LeBron James, for a superstar, he's as good a passer as anyone outside of maybe Magic and Bird. Bird was a better passer, in my opinion. What do I know about passing?
Bird was a great passer.
And then the along with, but Larry's body broke down. That has to matter.
Okay.
The length in which you excel at something has to matter.
I'm okay with that. Like, look, again, that's part of your argument, and it's a smart part of your argument. I can't dispute that. I mean, my point is that when he was at his best, Larry Bird in a fourth quarter, I'd rather have him have it. Larry Bird did not shy away from the three-point shooting contest the way that LeBron shied away from the dunk contest.
So you're giving Bird and Magic the edge.
That's so adorable.
I'm not
because they were down,
but because of the stretch.
Huh?
You're giving them the edge because you feel they were better in the clutch.
Yeah, they're better in the clutch. Look, it's different now than it was then. I'm willing to concede that I don't know what Larry Bird's athleticism would be like because he'd have to be far more athletic playing today. But he was good enough then, and I think he would assimilate to this game, and he would shoot the ball. It's like Chris Mullin didn't make a bunch of threes, but he would now.
He could have.
But if you want to make the argument his career didn't last long enough because his body broke down, it's a good argument, and I got no disputing it. But when they were at their best, Larry Bird was as or more impactful, and I would prefer to have him have the ball in the fourth quarter.
It has been so fun having you.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern. For Chris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.